I'm going to give each of our panelists a minute or two to introduce themselves, tell them share a little bit about themselves and what this topic means to them before we get started with our first question. So I'm going in order of my boxes here on my screen. Teri, can you start us off?
Yeah, hi, I'm Teri Leon. I am General Counsel with Pi Insurance. I have over 20 years of legal experience, actually. And I think that this topic means to me is I am always excited about continuing to promote women in leadership positions, and especially in startups, and the ability to be an entrepreneur, I think, is difficult for anyone, but can be even more difficult for women. So it's exciting to be able to see this kind of a panel come together and provide support to women in this kind of an area.
Thanks, Teri. Heather, I'll turn it over to you next. You're too much.
Sorry, I'm talking to my dog who wants to introduce himself. My name is Heather McIlhany. I oversee marketing here at Pi. I've mostly been in tech for the last 20 years. My dog feels strongly about women in leadership. And I care about this topic, obviously, since I've been a woman in a mostly male-dominated field for 20 years.
Thanks, Heather. Marla, be great to hear from you.
Hi, I'm Marla Blow. I am currently with the Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth, where we work on questions about financial security, and we mostly tackle that from the perspective of supporting small business. And relevant for this conversation and relevant to this audience is prior to joining Mastercard, I was an entrepreneur myself for about 5 or 6 years. I ran a company called FS Card that was focused on offering subprime credit to underserved communities in traditional products, and sold that company at the end of 2018. So I am well and truly familiar with all these challenges. In terms of being a woman in technology, I think similarly to some of what was just said, have been in arenas that have been overwhelmingly male dominated, and care deeply about what that means and how to change that, and what some of the pressures and idiosyncrasies around that actually are. So very much my life experience, and a topic that I am very much vested in. Thank you.
Thanks, Marla. A lot of that resonates with me personally as well. Yulia, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself as well.
Hey everyone, I'm Yulia Yaani. I'm CEO and co-founder of Real Atom. We're building technologies for commercial real estate lending industry. And before Real Atom, I had another 2 startups. And I worked for commercial real estate finance and investment for 17 years. I worked for Related, one of the largest companies in the US, and for real estate private equity fund. Today's topic is very, very urgent for us because we're in technology and we're entrepreneurs, and we have to raise venture capital throughout our existence. And a lot of venture capitalists are men. So we're at their mercy, and the way we navigate that environment really reflects on growth and development of our company. So happy to be on the panel today.
Thanks, Yulia. I think that you and Marla both bring really unique perspectives to this panel, in having actually been in the room with fundraising early on. It'll be interesting to hear what your experience has been like as we go through today. I wanted to remind everyone participating, well, first I wanted to again thank you for joining us. I've seen a lot of additional boxes pop up, so I know we have folks still joining. There is a group chat, so if you open that up to the right of your screen, if you do have any questions, just write question in all caps before that, and Rachel will be moderating. We'll try to jump in and include them throughout the conversation today. So. All right, ladies, so first question, in 2 sentences, so this is a bit limiting. What do you think that it means to be a great leader? And I'll go in reverse. We'll go in reverse of what we just did. So Yulia, if you don't mind going first, that would be great.
I'm still trying to discover.
and encapsulating it down to 2 sentences.
And honestly speaking, it's like a roller coaster. You think that you are, and then you are not. But I think one thing that we learned from our entrepreneurial experience, that transparency is one of the criteria for a leader to earn trust of the team. And we learn it through hard experiences. So that's one thing. And another one is to really engage the team into the decision making and problem solving. So it doesn't work just giving orders. It's really getting people to the table and listen to what they have to say and find a decision through discussion. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Yulia. Marla?
Yep, so I agree with a lot of that. I see great leadership as developing and building buy-in on a compelling rationale and vision for what we're doing and why we're doing it, and then assembling the resources and talent and empowering that talent to go forth and kind of take on and challenge this hill and take this hill. And so it's less about the ability to be a performer and much more about the ability to create the conditions for success for others.
Awesome. Heather?
I very much agree with that and have a similar answer. It's like, someone with a positive, an informed and positive outlook who can motivate others, their team, to strategically execute on this shared vision. But you have to build the picture so that folks want to move towards kind of a destination with you.
And Teri?
I agree with that. I think one of the big things about being a great leader is not only being able to create and share that vision, but you have to be able to be somebody people actually want to follow. And that means you have to be humble and you have to have a little bit of a service attitude, I think. And then you also have to be able to push people forward and give them the ability to grow in their own careers and have opportunities to make mistakes so that you can move them forward in their careers as well.
At Pi, we're also a startup, so I can tell you we all have lots of room to make mistakes. Marla, could you share with us a specific personal example in which a female colleague supported you in your growth as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, there are many examples, luckily and fortunately. One that comes to mind is during my time at FS Card, building a company in fintech. I came from financial services and then added technology to the plate. My network was overwhelmingly male. My general counsel was a woman, and she and I became kind of the driving force behind FS Card. And I know for a fact that at least once, maybe more than once, there were efforts to kind of go around me and get her to agree to something or sign off on something or join forces with someone else in ways that would not have been helpful for me. And I know that she actually resisted doing that and I knew nothing about it. I never knew that it even happened until well after the fact and well after having exited the company and everything else. And it was incredibly gratifying to know that kind of trust and that kind of loyalty was just kind of built into our relationship over the course of that 6 years. So can't say enough about what that meant and what that meant to me.
Sounds like an incredible experience that you had. Teri, have you found yourself, are there women that you've worked with over the years or a particular example where someone really stood out and how they supported you?
I have to say, unfortunately, no. I have not had a huge amount of women support me in my career, unfortunately. I have had mostly male bosses and mostly male colleagues. I was often the only woman in the room. Quite frankly. And so I have not had that experience. I wish I had, and I hope that I can give that experience to other females who are growing up in the leadership.
Well, I know I'm the moderator, but I can actually speak to personal experience. Teri and I, in our roles at Pi, work very closely together, and she's been a great supporter and champion of mine. And it's been refreshing to actually have an executive team that's almost 50% female. So thank you, Teri.
Thank you. That's very kind.
All right, we actually have a couple of questions that already came in the group chat, so thank you, everyone. I'm going to pause and take two of them, and I'm going to open them up to any of the panelists if you have thoughts on this. So Jessica is asking she is a non-technical founder, and she is wondering how you might do team building from the ground up, and if there are specific suggestions in building a solid team to support a vision.
So one of the things I'll start off with is first and foremost, go to every networking and presentation session and small business showcase and whatever you can find in and around DC. There are a lot of opportunities to get in front of people and hear from other people and meet people. I found our technology lead at a startup. So I don't even know what it was. It's like some kind of startup meet and greet or something like that, back in 2014. And he had a job and we just happened to meet there. But sure enough, about 6 months later, he was rolling out of the company that he had been in. And I, had a relationship with him just because of having met there. And he ended up staying and building the entire technology platform that we used at FS Card. So can't say enough about just being in conversation and showing up in places where other similarly minded people who are willing to take the kinds of risks that you have to take in order to be willing to join a startup company, and people who might themselves have the technology background that you may be looking for. So, show up, right?
That's great advice. You never know where you're going to find the next best hire.
Actually, Marla just stole my exact answer. I was going to say exactly the same. And it's not surprisingly because we're both entrepreneurs. I found my co-founder at 1776, and we didn't know each other before, and we've been happily married for 4 years now. I call it marriage because, you go through ups and downs, and you have to coexist and survive and continue. And the rest of the team, there is one tip that maybe I will tell founders who are just starting: always trust your guts. When you interview people, when you talk to people, sometimes we tell ourselves as women, hey, he will change. He will never change. She will never change. So if your gut is telling you at the beginning that maybe there is something and you're willing to overlook because you're desperate, you want to put the team together, always listen to yourself first.
Yeah, those not good hiring decisions are expensive in time, frustration, and of course dollars.
That's for sure.
All right, Harry, Heather, and Teri, this next one is for you. I am wondering how you have seen men potentially successfully act as allies for women that they work with.
I have very strong opinions on this one, so do you care if I go first, Teri?
Please.
Harry. Like I said, I started my career in banking, and then I've been in tech mostly for the last 20 years at places like Netflix and Square. So very, very male oriented companies. I've had wonderful, outstanding male colleagues. And yet I honestly struggle to think of any examples where I've had men amplify the voices of women or people of color. I think they could be fine colleagues, but I really have not seen men, particularly white men, go out of their way to feel as if this is their responsibility. Even the best men, I think, are coming really late to the party on this. They just haven't seen it as their role. I've had a few say to me this year, specifically after like the burst of BLM protests in June, literally that, and I think this is what's a little bit insidious about some of this stuff, is that women and people of color, and sometimes women and people of color, have been having this conversation in a way that has been trying to get the ball rolling on this. And I think that the predominant culture in a lot of these organizations has seen it as kind of like a side conversation. And I've had men specifically say to me, like, which again, I'm trying to be kind and generous to people who are coming to the party late, that it's like literally the first time they realize that they had a role to play in this. So a little surprising from my perspective, but I guess I'll take it. But that's my honest answer. I'm optimistic that hopefully we will have more participation, because these are the people who they hold the purse strings, they're in the seats of power, and truly, like, we can't just operate on the margins trying to move some of these conversations. But my frank answer is I have not had a lot of men amplify my voice.
Heather, can I ask you a follow-up question about this? When you do have folks that have been, you know, what seem like might be late to the game, but they're coming to you now and kind of acknowledging this, how have you, you know, it probably provokes a good bit of emotion. How do you respond, right? And then how do you engage in that dialogue?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is like, I don't think these are bad actors. Like, my dad's a white man. Many men in my life are white. Like, these are not bad actors. These are people who are, they're generous, lovely colleagues. So I think what I try to do is invite them to the conversation, because we can't punish people. If we want to punish people who have not gotten to something at the time we have, we will be leaving a lot of people out of the conversation. And so I try to be inviting and capitalize on the fact that, you know, these are, you know, people with many lovely attributes. And so to try to find this common ground and just be inviting and say, that's great. I think that's awesome. I'm glad that you see, I can see why maybe it is uncomfortable, but, you know, I think we really, to me, you've got to give this kind of person a bear hug, because they at least want to do the right thing.
Virtual bear hug.
Yeah, no mask bear hug for sure.
Teri, do you have any thoughts?
So yeah, I can say I have had one male leader who did actually successfully help be an ally to me. They were often there to encourage me. They were there to make sure that I got the proper introductions to people I need to. They made sure that my voice was heard in meetings when others were talking over me. And so I did actually have somebody who was a great ally for that, who was a male colleague. I do agree with Heather that is, of all the male colleagues I've had, it was one, so it's kind of few and far between. So I agree. I think they're a little bit late to the game, and they're just not, and I also don't think they necessarily know what they should be doing, which isn't good that they don't know it, but I don't know if they know what kind of actions they should be taking to help lead and lift up female leaders either. And maybe that's something that we can help them with, is help them understand the things they can do to help and assist.
I think we have several more questions here. Do you guys mind if I grab another one from the Q&A chat? So there was a follow-up from Jessica, who is the non-technical co-founder, and she is wondering if there are specific resources that any of us might recommend to actively find co-founders.
I mean, I know some, like, there's founder data.
Angel list.
Yeah.
Yeah, so AngelList, I know, was a great resource for Pi when we were looking to build our team in the first, I would say we used it pretty heavily in the first year, maybe 2 years. Any other suggestions?
Well, another way you can try to do, if you have specific expertise and you are looking for complementary expertise, go to PitchBook or Crunchbase and look for startups in your area that just started sort of in the same area, in the same field. Maybe you can join them instead of building something from scratch. It totally makes sense when you have similar ideas.
Thanks, Yulia. All right, and we have a comment about personally only finding male mentors in this space, which I think we actually have a couple of potential mentors right here in the panel. A lot of women that they've met in higher positions are not as interested in mentoring or collaborating. Have you experienced this? And if so, how have you responded in that situation?
So this is a question about, you know, we were talking about the support, et cetera. I mean, I think, you know, I've been in so many male environments. To the extent I've had any mentorship at all, it has also come from men. I've had the few women that have been around have been supportive, but they're so few that I haven't even been able to receive very much of it. I would say that the one thing that I have found if I were to think about any kind of consistency or theme around that is that men, as they start to get closer to retirement, right? So if you start thinking about older men who are now starting to reflect on their careers and starting to think about moving into what their legacy is, and those have been places where I've had people actually reach out, create opportunity, be much more engaged with thinking about all of the things that might have informed where they got to in their careers and who they see around them that may not have gotten as far as they have gotten, and then be looking to make a mark. And so I think if you're out there thinking about who in my organization or who in my ecosystem, I would look for the people that are starting to move into, I will just say statesmen. They're moving into the statesman kind of stage of their careers. They can actually be hugely influential and hugely helpful. So I've had, sort of retired CEOs and retired lawyers that have had long legal careers be incredibly helpful and be really strong mentors in my experience. But besides that, I think everything that Heather led with, like yes, 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 and yes.
Lots of plus ones.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a question for you, Marla and Yulia. How do you feel that gender stereotypes have impacted your confidence as a female leader?
Maybe I can give an example. We've been fundraising during this time of pandemic. It's already really hard. And then you reach out to VCs, or you reach out to people, to connectors, to ask for introductions to VCs, and they send you a list of Forbes 10 VCs that focus on women. And you sit back and you think, is that all I can go for? It's like, why, if I am a female founder, why do I have to go specifically to, 10 funds that focus on female founders when there are thousands of funds, period? So why is that you narrow down my option immediately? And this is frustrating. That's really frustrating. And that tells you, the way people think. They think that, it's a female oriented fund and you're female, so they will give you a chance, but the rest of them will not. It's all about giving a chance at the end of the day. VC industry, it's all about believing in teams, unless you're in serious, C, right? And I think, not even, doesn't matter what I think, the statistics says, only 2% of all founders that receive funding are female. So it's about how much chance those VC guys gave to those founders. And you cannot change it overnight. I mean, you really can't. You cannot jump from 2% to 50 during the pandemics. So, and I think it's a stereotype right there. I mean, if you're not 23 young white guy in Silicon Valley, you're immediately stereotyped. That's my opinion. Marla.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think a couple of things about gender stereotypes and trying to decide how to navigate, right, and how to present yourself and how to deal with some of the dynamics that people talking over you and whatever might be happening. So one of the things that really, like, partly I think for me was lack of awareness, right? Like, so if I rewind, 15 years ago in my career, I had a coach who was really life-changing for me. And one of the things he did was, I had a coach who was internal to the organization that I was working in. And he just started like showing up in meetings that I was in, which I was like, what the heck is happening? But what he was able to point out for me is that I was shrinking away, right? Like, and so I think that, this question about what is the, what has been the impact of the gender stereotypes, which I would have said, like, I don't care about any of that. That's not happening. But he was able to, he was present and he was saying, like, listen, I've watched you, right? Like, and I see what you're doing. And here are the things that you have to change. And it was very tactical, but it was much more about, like, he actually prescribed for me if you're in a half-hour meeting, you need to talk at the 10 o'clock mark, at the 20-minute mark, and at the 30-minute mark, in no matter what. Even if you're just saying, like, I agree with that, or I think that's a good idea, or I look forward to following up, whatever it is. But he was like, you not showing up is a problem. And I would have never thought that, like, what do you mean I'm not showing up? Of course I'm showing up. But it took a very prescriptive and somebody actually sitting in the room to notice whether or not I was doing the things that were being prescribed, for me to actually exercise that muscle and then get comfortable with just, like, I don't have to have something profound to say. Because I think part of it was this sense, probably because of gender stereotypes, like, I needed to only say something when I had, like, a big, meaty, powerful, insightful, differentiated thing to say. And that's not the case, right? And it's not a bar that anybody else is holding themselves to, right? That you can just say, like, I'm surprised to hear that. And that's fine, right? Like, it is okay. But I actually had to be given that kind of permission, and then really get a really hard push on actually starting from there, and then getting much more comfortable about just participating in the flow of conversation. But it was a barrier that I didn't even really realize was there for me.
Do you mind, Lauri, if I build on what Marla's saying for a minute? I think this is super interesting. And one thing I've noticed is with myself that I actually still think that male qualities are very rewarded, whether or not you're a male or female. It's these male attribute, like stereotypical attributes, that are rewarded, with some disclaimers, because there's some things women can't get away with that men can. But I'll give an example for myself. I'm a big interrupter. I'm not saying it's a good quality, but I'm an interrupter, and men are very much interrupters. Laura and Teri are nodding, but I'm a big interrupter, and men interrupt people all the time. They talk over each other. And I honestly attribute some of my success in certain contexts to the fact that I'm very willing and able, and again, I don't even think it's a positive quality, but that I actually have this stereotypical male quality. And so I actually, in some ways, think it's insidious that women are rewarded when they do some things that are not even that awesome, but you will find that it pays off in a male environment. And it's only in my mid-career, I think, that I've been more willing to take my more stereotypically female qualities, like consensus building. And again, these are somewhat stereotypical, but I think there's some truth here. Consensus building, more active listening, things like that, and really been willing to, like, flex those muscles in meetings and have the confidence to see how that goes, rather than kind of just going this kind of pound for pound with some of these more male qualities.
I've seen some of this in action, I think, Heather, over the last 2 years that we've worked together.
What do you mean?
It's been an evolution.
I just want to mention an anecdote here. Recently, I talked to my husband, and I mentioned imposter syndrome. Probably all female on the panel know what imposter syndrome is, right? My husband never heard about it. Never.
What is this
I should add, I'm laughing because I know Yulia's husband and used to work with him, so I am getting a good chuckle out of that.
But it's really talks about female and male dynamic. So we always think as female that maybe we should not be where we are. Guys, they don't think that way. So, and, when Marla was talking about those, internal stereotypes, so internal lack of awareness about ourselves. So I think it's all goes to, that we really deserve to be where we are. And we really should fight against, that imposter syndrome, because the other side doesn't. They just don't know about it.
I think some of our participants are kind of marveling at the idea of if we could all go through life without any sense of imposter syndrome, what would the world look like for women?
One other thing I just want to add on that, Lauri, before we move off this point, just for the share with the audience. So what Heather was talking about male traits, I think is a really important point, and men calibrate on that basis. And so one of the most insightful moments, tiny little moment I had in my career, was a guy talking about another guy asked me if he had gotten promoted because he'd noticed how much more he was talking. Literally, that was it. Like, that was the only thing he said. But for him, observations of how much he was talking were equal to, is he more senior? Like he said, this was someone who was outside my organization looking in, and taking cues on that basis. So men are interpreting on that same basis. So when you choose not to use your voice, you are sending signals that you might not even know you are sending. And men are calibrating on that basis because those are the signals that they use. And that's what they're used to gauging them on the basis of.
Well, I'm sure it's also interesting for everyone here, like the organizations that we've worked in and the culture of those organizations, and what kind of communication do they foster at different levels and from people of varying backgrounds. And if you have a loud voice coming from someone who doesn't have a seat at a leadership or executive table, is that voice welcome and respected, or is that voice asked to be quiet, right? We have another specific question here, and I think this might be good for you, Yulia, given the experience that you had. We have a female founder who is wondering, should they be targeting groups that prioritize funding for women? Like, how should they cast their net or focus their efforts based on the experience that maybe you have as felt across potentially a lot of our folks here today?
No. My answer is no. For a simple reason. Think about yourself. As a female founder, you always have to double prove how good you are, right? You always have to perform better than everyone around you. So those founders of female-oriented funds, most of them are women. And because of that, they are even more selective than male-led VCs. So I'm not saying do not talk to them. Absolutely talk to them, but talk to everyone. I mean, you literally need to have 90, 200 meetings to get funded. So that's why, and there are not enough female-oriented VCs. So I wouldn't put them, at the top of my list. And if someone is interested, I can share the experience, how to grade VCs offline. But don't just put your eggs into one basket.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, right? Like, and Yulia and I have actually talked about this exact question. And I will just kind of really add some emphasis to her point about there's not enough of them, right? Like, if you are out trying to catch fish, I think you want to go to where there's the absolute maximum number of fish and not try to go to the designated, come get your specific fish in this particular pond. You want to go into the big giant pool and go fishing there. It's harder and it's different, right? Like, and they may not have a propensity to want to select this particular kind of business. And if I rewind back to the days of FS Card and we were in intensive fundraising mode, it's hard to know, right? Like what I would have done. None of that existed 6 years ago, so I didn't even have that as an option. But it is, I think what you want is to maximize your chances of getting some money to trickle down onto you. And I think that means you go to where the maximum amount of money actually is, which is not in that arena.
I've got one more question here focusing in on fundraising. And then I'm going to go back to some of our other topics. I think this is probably best for Yulia and Marla, but Teri and Heather, feel free to chime in. Are there any funds that you're aware of that focus on empowering minority women? And I want to give a call out to Lisa Perez, who says she's got an all minority organization and 2/3 women. Snaps to that. Sorry, we're snappers at Pi.
I mean, I think
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think, you know, we're getting a lot of questions about that are very startup-y and founder oriented. I've never founded a company. And so I can probably speak more to leadership, but not unfortunately to funding or founding.
Teri, were you getting ready to add something?
I would have to be with Heather. I have not founded an organization, so I would not be able to tell people how to do that.
Okay. Good luck.
So let me rattle off a couple of things. So 1863 is a startup incubator here in DC that is doing a lot of work around supporting and preparing people of color for pitching, et cetera. Definitely recommend getting involved with 1863, and you can make a decision about how intensively you want to be involved or less so. But that's the first one that comes to mind. Black Girl Ventures, which even if you sounds like you may be Latina, given your last name is Perez, but I still encourage you to go seek out Shelley Bell and go and talk with her about what she's seeing out there and what's happening. I think Monica Montilla has a fund that I can't remember the name of right now. But her fund is fabulous. I highly recommend connecting with Monica. I'm happy to introduce you, Lisa, if you want. I think there's starting to be kind of a few of these that are cropping up. The Fearless Fund is another one that I would highlight, and the Fearless Fund is one that that Mastercard has actually been supporting on some of the training and preparation side to help entrepreneurial readiness aspects of it. But I would add Fearless to that list as well. There are probably a few more. If I actually went through my information, I could probably rattle off a few more, but that's the first few that come to mind. And so there is starting to be some opportunity there.
Thanks for sharing those.
Village Capital. I think we should add to that list, Village Capital.
Yeah, that's a good one.
They're also local.
Thank you both. Yulia and Teri, I've got a question for the two of you next. Wondering that as a female leader, what has been the most significant barrier to success in your career?
You know, we probably will comment at the same time on one of the following questions, but as female leaders, we all have families. We have kids, we have demanding husbands, and well, I always say that I have 3 kids, not 2. I see you, Marla, laughing. But that's true. I mean, I'm not 23, unfortunately, and I do have obligations outside of my company. And those obligations, you know, I cannot ignore whether I want or not. So when you when you have a team, the team is also requires your attention, your undivided attention. And to balance those 2 priorities is a really, really hard thing. And I can tell you from our experience, so me and my co-founder, we have very similar backgrounds. That's why we work together so well. So we, you know, certain age, and we have kids. And because of that, we cannot just go for happy hours with our team and, you know, have that ongoing bonding. We cannot do a lot of things that other founders can do. And that's limiting because you always have to be engaged with your team to build those relationships. And I think that's one of the main limitations that I've been seeing in my last company, just because it is what it is and you cannot avoid it.
Teri?
I would have to say truthfully, and this kind of goes back to what you guys were talking about earlier regarding gender stereotypes. Most of what I have seen is as a barrier to my career is me. I am the one who will not speak up in meetings, or not feel like my voice is important enough to be heard, or question my own knowledge about what I'm sharing. And then I make it sound like, well, I think this is it, instead of being definitive and confident that this is what it is. For me, it's the law, right? This is how it works in the law. And so I think that one of the big things is me. I can, especially when I was very young in my career, I could self-sabotage on some of those things and actually make myself seem less confident than I truly was, and then not have my voice heard in meetings. Like Marla mentioned, that you shrink back instead of go forward and just say, I agree with that. And this is in just simple comments. And I think that early in my career, I was probably the one who was the biggest barrier to my career success.
How have you overcome that over time?
I think over time I felt more confident. I had people who were asking me for my opinion more and more. And I think I also learned, like Marla did, that I have to be present. I have to be listening. I have to participate. People will not hear your voice if you don't. Now, obviously, as an attorney, a lot of my voice is a little bit, I will wait longer to say things because I'm giving a lot of times legal advice. And so I will make sure that I have more of the facts first. But you still have to be there to talk about things. And if it's business discussions, you still have to be involved in those, even if it's not, for me, a legal issue or question.
Thanks for sharing, Teri. Marla and Yulia, I want to ask you a little bit more about diversity. I also have a dog who seems to want to join the conversation right now, so my apologies if she makes herself known. Diversity comes in many forms: gender, sexual orientation, race, and ethnicity. There's a lot of dialogue happening in the DE&I community about intersectionality. And I'm wondering how you've seen organizations successfully support women who are also part of another minority group.
You want to go first?
Just again, wanted to give a quick example from my prior career. I was fortunate to live and work in Miami, in Florida, and it has a huge Latino population. And in the company where I work, it was actually the largest developer in the area. They were very keen on promoting Latino women to management positions. And only right now I understand that and realize that it was not very common across the area, but in the specific company, I think they really believe that the Latino women can move the company forward. And I think it's an amazing example. There is a reason why this company was one of the most successful in the industry at that time and even right now. And I do believe that women build that foundation, and they were Latino women. So, and you don't have to be in Miami to feel the power of your background. You know, moving from the Latino to me being Russian, even though I've been living in the US for over 25 years, you still have to acknowledge and build on what you have from your background, whether you are one minority or another. And I think you always have to be proud and cultivate those qualities internally to begin with.
I think that's right. I mean, I think one of the things that I think is overlooked, and I've been talking about this a little bit with our diversity lead at Mastercard. I should probably preface what I'm about to say right now is that, like, I speak for myself, right? Mastercard is about to disavow me as soon as I finish what I'm about to say. But part of what is needed is actually examples, right? So if you are out talking about your resource groups and your support systems and your mentorship and training and coaching and blah, 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 and people are looking up the chain and they don't see anybody, like I think you lose all ability to credibly make an argument about that. And so, and that doesn't mean, one, right? Like it means sort of demonstrating by people being able to observe what it means to be able to advance in that organization. And so I think part of what has come to the fore as organizations have been out announcing on social media and making press releases about their support for Black communities, right? Like it's falling on pretty hard. It's pretty hard to take that seriously if you don't have any Black people anywhere in your leadership. Nobody's on the board, right? Like nobody's visible. And so I think part of it is you have to sort of you have to put your money where your mouth is and make that really kind of hold together and hang together as a platform. So I do think that having business resource groups and having mentorship, coaching, training, all of that kind of stuff is key, and that is actually hugely valuable. But if it's not also accompanied by some demonstration, I think you're going to lose a lot of credibility around it.
Heather, I have a question for you next. I am wondering if you wanted to give some advice to this group, what advice do you have for women who want to get into leadership, especially in an industry like what we all represent, which is something that's tech-based?
Sure. One of the things that I think is best positioning yourself for advancement and leadership is obtaining subject matter expertise. Honestly, because if you have subject matter expertise in something, it just becomes harder for you to be like, you become kind of more unassailable. It's just hard to, push back at some point. It is harder to push back on people who truly have subject matter expertise. And not just is it harder to push back, but people then seek you out because you're the person who knows, a specific area. So that's something that to me is always incredibly valuable. If you're the single point of failure for something, it turns out it often increases your value. So that's one thing. Subject matter expertise I think is important. I think it also with women helps increase your confidence if you know that you have this expertise. And then I just say keep pushing. I will say that I don't think it gets easier as a woman. I think actually, interestingly, I think mid-career misogyny is very real. I think there's a lot of folks, I would have been surprised to hear myself say this a few years ago, but I think that there's a lot of people who are very happy to have a lot of smart young women be worker bees, conscientious workers in their in companies. But all of a sudden, when you're at the same table with them as a peer, you'll see this like second wave of pushback that you were like, wait a minute, but we used to just all work together. We were all like buddies. So that's, it does not get easier. I think in some ways it gets harder, but just keep pushing is my advice. You are not you have as much a right as anyone else to be there, and maybe more right because it's probably been harder for you to get there.
Heather, your mid-career misogyny is getting quite a reaction in the chat. And I think I also saw Marla nodding along with that comment. Marla, is there anything that you want to add?
Only that I think that completely accurate, especially the part about the mid-career worker bee thing. Like the ability to trust that something's going to be buttoned down and accurate and done to the right level. Is what gets you to that middle place, right? Like those are skills you have to demonstrate, and then people will be very happy to have you there doing that for the rest of your life. Yeah, so it just totally resonates.
Next question that I have is for Yulia and Marla. We've all heard the phrase, you can't have it all. I don't know if anybody's read that Why We Can't Sleep book, Go Suicide. I was reading it, I couldn't finish it. I found it so depressing, to be honest. But you can't have it all. What strategies have you used to balance work and obligations? I think you've both mentioned having a spouse or having family. So do you feel that women face an additional burden for trying to balance that, if that's what they bring to the table? And are there organizations or other resources that you found that really have given you support?
So I'll start in on this one, and then I'll let Julia pile on, and lots of other folks pile on as well. And actually, I'll use today as an example, right? So on the call that I was on before this one, I was cooking a hamburger for my kid while I was on that conference call. It was on Zoom, so I was like turning video off, cooking a burger, and you know what my kid had for lunch? A burger, nothing else, right? Like, so what I have figured out how to be comfortable with is that I'm doing a less than optimal level of output on every front, right? Like I'm less good on that conference call because I'm making a burger. My son is not eating healthily because he's at home during a pandemic while I am on a call all the time because I couldn't cook during this call. So I had to cook during the previous one to make sure that he had something to eat. The amount of screen time, like, go for it, right? Like, go crazy, go have more. I mean, so yeah, and, you know, being comfortable with like not being checked in on what's happening with my family, like, you know, it is a constant willingness to accept kind of B/B- level performance from myself in order to be capable of doing as many of the things as I'm doing. I think I could do like a cut off something and maybe upgrade the overall level of my performance on a variety of things. I could be a better parent. I could be a better partner. I could be a better team leader. I could be a better friend. But I would have to drop something, right? And so I've heard people describe it as, you know, you've got your company, you've got your family, you've got your health, you've got your, you know, and you can pick 2 of the 3, right? Like, and figure out, or if you add friends, you can pick 3 of the 4, but something gets compromised, or you can do them all at relatively suboptimal levels and live with that. But I definitely come down on the side of like having it all at the optimal level, like totally impossible.
It'll be interesting to see whether this 2020 debacle will, in some ways, it's a forcing function of a lot of unfortunate things. But if there's a tiny silver lining, maybe it will force folks to shed some things, because it's truly, if you were still under the illusion that you could do it all before, you're certainly not under that illusion now.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't have any illusions, Heather. I'm glad you mentioned that. No illusions left about, you know, that you can do it all. But one thing that I would recommend to everyone, and especially founders, do not compromise on your health. Because if you decide that you can do it all and then you don't sleep, you cannot function after that. Or if you get stressed over fundraising or how to run your company during the pandemics, at the end of the day, you get sick if you don't exercise or find some other outlet for to keep you going. So with that, you know, I always think, okay, if I will go and exercise for an hour, that's maybe 1 hour I can spend with my kids or work. But at the end of the day, it doesn't worth it, because that's the energy, that additional energy you will get to keep going. So that would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Yulia. So we have a few minutes, just 2 minutes left before we wrap up. I can see that Rachel's rejoined us from DC Startup Week. I want to follow up just on a comment, Yulia, that you've made. I had the opportunity early on with Pi to participate in a Thrive Global event. It's an Ariana Huffington company. If you've never heard of it, it's definitely worth checking out. She is really trying to lead the way, making sure that people in our community are getting enough sleep so that they can show up, not just for work, but for their families as well. It was a really eye-opening experience to be in the room with founders and many other women in leadership roles who are struggling with this and figuring out how to reprioritize just taking care of themselves. So if you haven't before, you might want to check out Thrive Global. Since we have 2 minutes left, I am wondering if the panel has any other closing thoughts that they would like to share with the group on our general topic or anything that really resonated with them today.
I just had one thing on because you had this question about why is there such a shortage of women in technology that I've kind of a shocker. I have a strong opinion on this. And I guess for me, for a very, very long time, I've been torn as to whether this is something to lament. Because to me, it feels as if like the fact that we even put to the technology field on a pedestal, as opposed to like teaching or nursing or something that as a field where there are already an abundance of women, says to me that we're biased actually in terms of buzz and other things towards male dominated industries. Now I understand like there's a lot of wealth creation here and there's a lot of interesting roles. It's a very, contemporary field with a lot of opportunities. So on the one hand, I like the idea of getting women into technology. On the other hand, I wish we as a society would like turn a spotlight onto nonprofits and other areas that just simply don't get any, airtime compared to like these tech founders. And there's just as incredible work happening there. And we simply we don't put a value on it the way we do for like a guy who made one good app. That's my last hot take.
Thanks, Helen.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think hopefully, there's been a lot of honesty here, which I think is always refreshing, and that you shouldn't take away from this like I'm doomed or I have, or how am I going to do any of this, right? Like what you can take away from it, hopefully, is that you are not alone, right? That what you are imagining or what you are experiencing or suspect is happening or are watching slip through the cracks in your own life, like it's happening here as well, right? Like there's no magic answer. Ariana Huffington fell asleep at her desk and like cracked her cheekbone on her face, right? Like that. We are all out here doing the same stuff. So take some comfort in the camaraderie, and then go out there and kick some ass, right? Like, sorry, hopefully we're allowed to drop a little A word on here, but go out there and do it.
I think my final word will be whether you're in technology or in other fields, and if you're a female and you feel that you're hitting the glass ceiling, don't give up. Just don't give up, because, recently I heard that someone called Kamala Harris angry black woman. You know what? I become, an angry Russian woman when I cannot move forward because someone doesn't want to listen to my pitch or doesn't want to, work with me. Basically, that motivates me to go forward, and basically I will show them. I will really show them. And I think that can be one of the motivations why we as female founders or women in the society can move and advance ourselves. So don't give up.
This is the last thing I would say is I agree with what everyone said. You've got to take the risks. Because if you are not taking the risks yourself, someone else will. And if it's a man, they will move ahead of you because you didn't take it. And then have confidence in your own abilities. Do not assume whether it's male or female that somebody else necessarily knows more than you do. Know your stuff, have confidence in it, and then take the risk to move forward, because you can do great things if you take those risks that others will take. Maybe because it's easier for them or whatever, but you have to take the risks or you will not become the leaders that you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
This was a fantastic conversation. Best spent lunch hour for me in a long time. So thank you to you all. And I know that we have lots of great feedback in the Zoom chat. So just appreciate you all taking the time out of your schedule to talk about this topic and share your advice and insights.
Thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you to all the amazing panelists. I've already gotten feedback on social media and comments how inspiring this panel is for women founders and particularly women in tech. So thank you so much for such an honest and transparent conversation. Again, we're in day 3 of DC Startup Week, jam-packed sessions for the rest of the day. We're going to kickstart our 1 p.m. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Lauri, for moderating a wonderful panel. And thank you much for Pi Supporter for supporting DC Startup Week and supporting conversations like these that are needed. So thank you so much for putting together this amazing talk.